Hey, y'all. So, thank you for being here. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. And I come on this podcast to talk to amazing people that are doing things to empower other people by sharing their story. And the goal is to help people kind of shift their thought process. And I'm so excited to have this guest on. I'm going to have you introduce yourself to my audience, please.
Hey everyone, this is Coco the Herbalist of Root to Roots Wellness. So excited to be here with all of you.
And I'm really excited too because you haven't always been an herbalist. This is not how you grew up and thinking about plant medicine, thinking about healing in a very holistic way. So we're gonna figure out how you got to this point. So tell people about like where were you raised? Were you raised in the country?
So Celeste, I definitely wasn't thinking about plant medicine at all as a younger person. I still consider myself young. I was born in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
Went to college, got on a route of doing work in international development. I worked out in Cameroon for almost 3 years. And then
Oh
by the time I got
wow.
back, I was
What was you doing in
doing,
Cameroon?
so I was in Cameroon, Peace Corps.
Oh
I
yeah.
did
Okay.
Peace Corps in Cameroon. So I was working doing microfinance consulting there. By the time I moved back, a friend had recommended that I look into something called community organizing based upon some stuff that I was doing. So I was in Cameroon doing microfinance consulting, found myself doing a lot of work around now what I know there's a word for community organizing around getting more potable water in the town that I was in. And so in the process of community organizing, like starting to figure out, oh, I think this is something that I'd really be interested in. And so I ended up moving back to the States, took a job in New Orleans doing community organizing. So I was largely working on issues related to mass incarceration. I was doing a lot of restorative justice work in schools, things like that, but definitely did not have plant
So
medicine on my
finance to community organization. So when you're over there in Cameroon, you're noticing some things that aren't up to par, and you felt it sounds like you felt compassion and just started working on organizing some things. And that's how one of your friends seen that you was interested in it and kind of talked to you about other ways to community organize. Is that what happened?
Yes, ish. The thing that I love about community organizing is I think people are doing it all the time. I was doing it before even having this formal name of, oh, you're community organizing, or there's a such thing as,
Mhm.
professional community organizers. So much of community organizing is about this is jacked up. What are we going to do about it? And so I found myself with others, just working on things that were important to me. Clean water is kind of important at the end
Yeah.
of the day. And so trying to, figure that piece out. So then recognizing, oh, there's actually a way to do this
Mhm.
inside of a structure where maybe I can have even more impact.
Yeah.
That was the start of some things.
So then now you're in New Orleans and you're doing more formal work around community organizing. Did you feel like drained, or were you just full of adrenaline and passion at that point?
Oh my goodness, I was so green, like most, new like most new organizers are, really passionate, excited, wanting to change the world and all these other
Yeah.
things. And got really burnt out, got really, really clear that the best hope that I have for change is, changing myself, being intentional about
Mhm.
my own, self-work, and knowing that that is a ripple outward. One of the things that really stood out for me, doing that work was that there was one point where I was being recruited to be the executive director at another affiliate of ours, and
Mhm.
it's really clear that, oh my goodness, like I am not just depressed, like I'm at a low, and at this low, I'm being promoted and like recruited to do these other things. Like, what the hell is happening to where nobody can see that I'm about to, implode? And so just getting really, really clear that part of what matters to me in any level of social activism work is that there's an understanding and a balance of this work does not exist without us being really intentional of creating more resources for mental health services for people who do, this type of work. It's like there is no social justice movement without social justice workers. And many of us come to this work with some level of trauma that's propelling us, towards the injustices that happened in our own lives, and how are we being intentional about not letting these things, continue to perpetuate, but just, unfortunately we'll end up in these cycles of perpetuating similar hurts and traumas in our own workplace and environment, et cetera, trying to save people and all these other things. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Can I pause you for 1 second? Because I want to hear, because there's a lot of people doing work in the community, and you are making an important point about the balance, and you talked about hitting a low. What did that look like for you? Because I feel like sometimes, especially with Black women, and I know males as well, but I tend to see that we can operate when we're extremely low. The fact that you're being vetted for this executive director promotion, and you're like saying you were at a low, it looks differently for Black people. It's not what we see on TV. What did it look like for you?
Absolutely. I feel like there's a term out there right now, like being high functioning and being depressed. What it looked like for me was getting up and going to work every day. What it looked like for me was, I think I had become a professional at, wearing a mask of I'm okay. It looked like showing up and doing my work and having a really hard time finding places that felt authentic to my own experience, that were meaningful in helping me to process things. I got really clear that I was able to manage things in a good enough way to where I could still do the functions of life, but was, still really struggling with all the pressures that come along with doing community organizing type of work, and especially the type of issue cuts that I was finding myself involved in relationship to mass incarceration. That particular year, Trayvon Martin was murdered, and all the re-stimulation that I didn't have language for at the time of, oh my goodness, like we're talking about people who, are my brother, now as a wife and having a young son, like all of those, things that for my work were really getting, housed in issues like in systemic change. But it's like, no, this is deeply personal. Like I'm actually really struggling with, the fact that we can't seem to figure out how to make sure that little Black boys are safe, walking around in the street, and like that assault, on my humanity, like that assault on, my level of feeling safe, and my concern for safety, with people that I cared about. And so really, but in the, work, oftentimes, the avenues are, okay, so go see your therapist, which is what I was doing, which is, exactly, what I was doing. And, realizing that for myself, I was developing these skills that were helping me to like manage particular things, but I wasn't healing, from stuff. It's like at the end of the day, I was like, I know how to do this. I know how to like get up and go to work and obviously do a good enough job to where, there's opportunities for me in different places, but like getting really clear that this ain't cutting it. And I really looking for something more.
Wow. So you were just surviving. And like Coco's saying, in regards to the traumas we come with, and as people who have seen a lot, a lot of times we have this compassion, so much more compassion for people, not realizing like how we're hurting. And there's just so much happening around the world today, that it's impossible for one person to do everything. And I've like tried to change my perspective when things are like really bad, and just say, you know what, I'm doing my part, because I cannot allow myself to get wrapped up in everything that's going on. I think it's just too much for the human brain to, especially somebody is like your passion and purpose is like working with others. So it's really hard to, you'll burn out in that way.
Absolutely.
So now, and another thing she said, you know, I started this podcast because when I went into private practice as a therapist, I recognized that therapy is not always accessible for us. I didn't know that at first. And also that therapy is not the only modality to healing. And so I like, you know, I really wanted people to understand like the different modalities that come with healing. And, you know, one of the things about growing up in America is that they start our history books with us as slaves, and
Mhm.
that definitely wasn't the case. A lot of what you're doing now are practices that has always been done, that we were stripped away from. So, what led you into looking at alternative ways of healing? You know, you did the therapy route, you were surviving, functioning, and then when did you decide or take this like aha moment and switch up?
Yeah. So for me, yeah, I got into herbalism really just looking to support my own mental health. So
Explain what that is for people who may not know.
So herbalism is a practice of working with plant medicine to support different aspect of healing. So from our physical, emotional, mental health, recognizing that all of those are areas that we have to be intentional about. And so working with these physical plants and medicine, but also the energy and spirit of these plants. And so for me, my first step was, putting my toe in the water. And it's like, oh, I heard from someone, you should pay attention to what you eat. You are what you eat. And so it started with becoming a vegan, and being really intentional about my diet and actually seeing,
A
some
difference. Because
exactly
you
like,
know,
oh, there's truth to
in
this.
in our culture, food is a huge coping
Oh,
mechanism that we don't even recognize that we're utilizing. And the
oh
food,
my goodness.
the stuff about what you eat, I had my second child by the time I even like thought about things that deeply. I'm like, why am I a whole adult just now learning this stuff? Like it's so bad. It's so bad. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
'Cause we have people like my grandfather. I can remember when I became a vegan, my grandfather was like, "Baby, you are welcome here. Help yourself to all the grass in the backyard." Like like like, "All right, bruh. All right, bruh." But, I have found a lot more balance, over the years. It was, very strict when I first started making these lifestyle changes and just really getting really clear, like, just expounding upon what you said, that food is so cultural. It's not just food, like, there's an energy to food. There's a socio like emotional part of eating together. All these things, matter when we're thinking about meals. And so it's been important for me as I've been researching and learning more about like our own cultural practices. So especially like African practices when it comes to herbalism. And there are many, like way too many for me to ever know in one lifetime. But there are some places where I've started to be really interested and focus in more. And it's just powerful, to see all the ways that, these medicines are first and foremost our food, and so it's like my entry point was there. And I think for all of us, just recognizing that if you're intentional, about what you eat and you're thinking about those things, you're practicing herbalism in some way. It's like for, so many of us that can be enough. It's like when we're working with, teas and tinctures and I think some of the more exotic, forms of what people think about as herbalism, they have a purpose, and a practice, and there's a scope of work, that we operate with integrity in that direction. But the first and, foremost thing that I'm going to look at with people is tell me about what you're eating, because we can do so much, in just that area, including our mental health. And so for me, that was the entry point. But especially as I, just started to see, oh, there's something to this. I'm seeing, oh, when I eat like crap, I feel like crap. Oh, I'm, noticing that, oh, when I make a difference in including, more fresh greens and vegetables and fresh fruits, that I have more energy, I feel better, like these sorts of things. That definitely started to, deepen my interest in, oh, and so then in what ways can I be supporting my mental health even more intentionally?
Right.
And so, I took these different herbalism certifications to learn more about,
Hold on,
like,
before you tell me how you
oh, go
started
ahead.
learning more, was it scary? Because when I started talking about mental health, like people was like, "What's wrong with you? Like we don't do that." And so, I know you have a garden, like you're really big into this stuff. I just started a garden, and when I started, I was so overwhelmed, like some days I would wake up and I would feel anxious because I'm like, oh, there's so much like to learn, right? And I'm learning on YouTube. And I just
Beautiful.
actually like cooked something with like a pepper I got from the garden. Like I'm like filled with so much joy because my mindset is always like, you know what, just try. Like I've always had that mindset. But I'm curious because to go from like Tennessee to talking about you're going to look at this food stuff, what did that feel like internally, and was it received by people around you?
Ooh, um, so first of all, my several years ago, I wasn't even several years ago, I don't even know that I had the language for I struggle with depression or I have mental health
Okay.
issues.
Okay.
I have people in my family who've been diagnosed as bipolar, people who I'm in relationship with who have mental health issues. And I think,
Hmm.
how these very stereotypical ways that we learn of who should be seeking help, and who is okay, like you're, fine.
Yep.
I grew up hearing I'm too blessed to be stressed, which I think is killing too many of us. I'm just like, you better figure this out. Let's talk about this. But for the longest, I think because I was able to go to school, do well in school, hold down a job, didn't struggle with getting up and going to work and, having relationships and doing those sorts of things. I just thought this was normal. I thought this was life.
Mhm.
I thought this is what you do, like this is
Yeah.
called adulting,
Yeah.
not that I need to be more intentional about, what's happening in my mental health. And so, looking back, I think that there are ways in which I definitely was closeted around a lot of these things,
Yeah.
because of my own upbringing in the church and, some of the shame and embarrassment of, well, why didn't you just pray about it? Like, if you just prayed about
Right.
it, like everything, would get better. And so something must be wrong with me because my
Right.
prayers are seemingly going unanswered, or
Right.
oh, I'm not living in a lie. I must be doing something wrong, that's
Yeah.
causing these things to, to happen. And so all of that, like being my own, I think some of the environmental factors, but then also getting really clear by the time that I started to actually ask, for help, like, oh, I think I will try, therapy. My family, supportive, like,
Okay.
okay, I guess whatever,
Probably
go ahead and do
confused
that.
because you're functioning and you're not on the street, like, confused. And no, and this is no shade to our caregivers because I feel like our parents, they're survivors.
Absolutely.
May not have had access to learning how to live the opportunities. So, when there's some people, they say, well, like I had a roof over my head, clothes over my back, and they have a hard time like stating like what is. And it's like, in order to get to the root of the problem, we got to like acknowledge what's going on. And I think because we come from survivors, it's the reason why we like learn to survive life, which is what it sounds like you were doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now you learn all of this stuff for yourself and you're noticing changes. And that's for me too. I went to therapy. I started seeing changes in myself and I was like, oh, I got to tell the people. Like, I just became even more passionate about like talking about like healing, even though it wasn't like 10 years ago, it wasn't like the end thing to do. But I was doing it anyway because I was like, I feel like I'm in a whole nother world. Like I'm not like dealing with depression for so many years and going to school and not understand. Like when I say going to school, like going to school, working, like literally functioning according to societal standards, I'm living my best life.
Yep. Yep.
And then understanding what's going on, I'm like, I gotta let people know there's another way to live. So I got so passionate about it. So apparently you got passionate about like noticing your changes and you started taking classes. Tell me about that.
Oh, wow. I mean, the plants really called me, like I started to take these, certification classes in herbalism and just loved it, just something that I genuinely enjoy doing. I love everything from being out, in the garden. What's today? Wednesday, just yesterday. I trained at a place called Pharmacy Herbs in Providence. And so there's an herb farm associated with the storefront. And so I went out, and helped out in the farm yesterday and being able to, just harvest all this powerful medicine that I know is being grown, sustainably and organically and, all the things. I'm constantly learning, new stuff. I've never worked with the herbs spilanthes before. And so I, take like, working with harvesting the herbs and like, tasting and nibbling things all at the same time. And so spilanthes, I'm chewing on it. And it's like a natural bubble gum. It's like these little tiny little yellow bulbs and you chew on it and it like creates this numbing sensation in your mouth. But then it's like this, ooh, crazy cooling, effect. And you could use it to make powerful mouthwash. You can tincture it, use it in mouthwash, use it if, I can't get to the dentist, or in a lot of my work, like how I'm supporting people who don't have these traditional accesses to, medical care and things like that. You can use it for, like if people have a cavity and, they're not going to be able to get it treated, soon, all these different things. And so it's like just being in it, it's like part of this you don't know until you get in proximity. I don't think I could have like understood just how deeply all these things resonated, to me until I took that first step of, I know that this interests me, let me see what there, is to it. And so now, especially as I'm navigating, like finding these niches that I really love. And so I'm finding for myself, it's like I am so enthused about, learning about our ancestral practices during slavery, all the ways that, our folks were using, herbs for all sorts of things, using herbs to support women in having healthy pregnancies, the ways that we were supplementing our diets, in slavery with these powerful herbs and foods, the ways that we were using them to carry on some of our cultural traditions. So one of the things that I love supporting people in is creating a baby's first bath, so herbal baths, and like all the just beauty and wonder and storytelling and like culture and like retention of practices that people try to strip us of. It's like all that in the plants and in the medicine. So all of that is like what I'm so excited about and interested in.
You recently went away for a little bit to learn even more, right? So
Yeah.
I can only imagine like it sounds very empowering, but then it's like, do you ever feel sometimes the pain or the sadness from just thinking about everything that they had to endure just to be okay?
I feel more Black joy now. Before
Oh,
going to
good.
Africa, I'm like, fuck all of this. I feel way more Black joy now. I had to
Oh,
work through
good.
some of my feelings. But
Oh my God.
one of the things I really had to be agitated around is what is more like resistant to white supremacy and all these isms than
Joy.
Black joy? We actually
Yes.
get to deserve joy.
Yep.
We deserve it all. Our ancestors, if nothing else, have like paid that 10 times over for us to be able to live our best lives. And so for me, going to I actually went to Gabon in Central West Africa. Ironically, it borders Cameroon to the south. And so when I was
Okay.
there for 3 years, I was like, I was so close. Like I was just so,
You were
so
so
close.
far removed from that mindset anyways.
Okay, but I feel like it's always there, right? It's like
Oh,
always,
yeah, that's true.
there and calling you. So what's interesting is as an herbalist, I've really gotten interested in supporting my own mental health. And so
Yeah.
recognizing I was naming before that I felt like I was managing it. Is there something I
Yeah.
can do to actually heal, from
Yeah.
this? And so as I'm, in the process of learning about nervines and like all these different, really good medicines for supporting mental health, I learn about iboga. And so now this classification of psychedelics and, just all
Mm.
these really powerful ways that indigenous people since the beginning of time have been working with this particular medicine. But now, especially in the West, so many of us, what I was reading a report that said by 2020, so this is what 2 years ago now, that the majority of reasons why people will take disability at work is for mental health issues.
Dang.
It's like now so many of us, are trying to
Yeah.
figure out how in the world, like, what can I do? Like, how do I support myself, in this
Yeah.
capacity? And so, being so interested in that for my, just coming out of my own story, I'm starting to learn about, these other alternative ways that people are finding support. And so I learned about iboga, which is an African plant medicine that originates in southern Gabon. And so I'm like, whoa, okay, I want to hear more. So people are coming all over the West to work with it for emotional insobriety, anxiety, all these things. It's also really incredible for helping people break addictions to hardcore street drugs, antidepressants, painkillers, like all these, amazing things. So through the wonders of technology, I'm able to
Wow.
connect with one of the shaman there. His name's Magunda. And so I'm reaching out, telling him my story. And he's like, I'd love to have you, come and train. And I'm like, okay, wonderful. I'm coming. And he's like, all right, you got to commit to 2 months. I'm like, oh, I ain't coming. I'm like, how in the world? I'm like, I got a I got a whole marriage and
Yeah,
a
this ain't no
whole
America, quickie. This is we do the real stuff down here. You need 2 months.
okay. I'm like, I got a whole baby, a whole mortgage. How in the
Oh
world am I
my
gonna figure out how to make this work? And so, my husband, he's like, I'm excited for you. Da, da, da. I tell him about this. He's like, absolutely not. Ain't no way in the world. You go leave for that amount of time. We were trying to figure it out for the better part of a year. We finally figure it out. My family's gonna come in town, help him with the baby. Like, we're gonna make it happen. Celeste, I kid you not. I put in my deposit, and then a week later, I find out that I'm from Gabon. I'm from the Fang people. Live
What?
it. I'm from on my paternal side, on my father's line. I descend from the Fang people living in Gabon, who are so the tradition that houses the plant medicine that it comes out of is Buiti. So like that's the culture and the people, and they're all over Central West Africa in different parts. Those are the folks that I come from. These Aboga using Buiti practitioners, and hello, here I am going. So that's why I said it's always there. It's like those little small whispers. Pay attention to your food, because I feel like
Yeah.
that was the first start, and that led to, oh well, what else can herbs do? Oh well, let me learn about these nervines. Oh well, let me learn
Yeah.
about iboga, and now I'm back home. So it's like no matter what, it's like these things people have tried to break those connections in
Yeah.
us, but they're unbreakable.
I had
Yeah.
this lady, she's very spiritual, but she says like your ancestors are gonna carry you to where you need to be. And I feel like what happened, it's like, but you kept listening to your inner spiritual world, right? Like, do you feel like you were, even if it was difficult, you were listening to it?
Sis, I feel like 80% of my journey has been trusting myself. And like just
Yeah, that's huge.
80% of my healing really sits in ain't nothing wrong with you. Trust yourself. Like do the thing that you're being called to do.
Um,
Absolutely.
and then I want you to tell us about your time there. But for people listening, uh, you are with yourself 24/7, and I know it's challenging when you're struggling to sit with yourself. But until we sit with ourselves, it's really hard to like decipher and use discernment and know where we're called to be or do. And but we're always on the go, we're on our phones, we're always doing, some of us are always doing things for other people, and so by the time we are ready to sit with ourselves, it's to go to sleep. So making time to just be with you, I know it's challenging when you're not used to it, but it's necessary because I feel like our inner like spirit can guide us.
Mhm.
But we have to have a connection with ourselves, and a lot of times we're not connecting to ourselves at all.
Absolutely.
But tell us about the
Absolutely.
time there. That's so amazing. Like that gave me chills. 'Cause I had this lady tell me that, and I was like, "Wow!" And here you are telling me it's second time.
Absolutely. It was amazing and it was hard all at the same time. So much of this training is about, if you're going to be able to provide the medicine to other people, then you have to heal yourself. And so, very deep work, looking at all the places where, there's misalignment. One of the things that Bhuiti teaches is that 60% of the medicine is the fire talk, which really resonates with me when I think about just the form of Western medicine. It's like, oh, in many ways, these indigenous ancestral teachings and fire talks, are the predecessor to talk therapy, that we have in the West. It's like there's and that there's so much value, there. And so there was so much emphasis on, there are nights where we have ceremony, but the majority of the work that you're going to do is integrating these teachings into your life. And so, some of my huge takeaways in relationship to the teachings are, Bhuiti teaches that if one is struggling with issues like in the mind, then it's because on some level or another confusion has occurred, because there's clarity. We all have clarity. Like, we all know ourselves, and what we refer to as our intuition is really our soul. It's our soul speaking to us. It's those silent whispers of, I don't know why I know that. I just know that. Like, I don't know why, I know that you ain't telling the truth, but I know. Like, it's like that gut, reaction. And that's just really beautiful, but gets really clouded, right? It's really hard to listen to, because we can find ourselves out of alignment in all these places. And another thing that I just want to, say to that point, it's so powerful because in Bhuiti, the soul, it's thought of as the thing inside of us that makes us, like God. It's that connection. So in many ways, it's like your divine GPS, walking around. It's like God talking to your soul, and like your soul talking to you. And so just having to sit in the pure agony of all the places where I was lying to myself, that's created, all the confusion, all the shoulda, wouldas, the things I feel like I'm supposed to do, that I don't like doing, the relationships that, I know are toxic, or not really. I know my soul knows are toxic, but I'm telling myself, oh, it's fine because you're not doing this or you're not doing that, or they ain't cussed me out, or they didn't try to steal my husband, or all this other stuff. It's just like, actually, you can just have a soul knowing that, yeah, this relationship ain't right and ain't been right, for a while. But my MO was, unless you did me something, unless you pissed me off, or like were outwardly rude or, mean to me, then just like holding on to, I saw this meme saying, we hold on to, relationships, thinking that they're seeds when we know they're grapes. It's just like, yep, I think I, do that way too many times. Or having to be honest, with myself around, oh, I'm a mother, now, and a wife now. Like, where are the places where I don't really honor what I want, trying to compromise in relationship to what I think, is best for, my family. And not telling people to go out, and blow up their, homes, but like being willing to lean in and have these really courageous conversations around, I know this sounds crazy, but I want to go to Africa for 2 months. Can you support me, in getting there? And not just all these other places where I've just told myself, you can't do that, like, like that's for younger people than you. That's for when you were in college. That was, all this other stuff. And yeah, and so having to like really sit in, I'm a person who went through a lot, as a kid, but I didn't always feel that way. Like it was almost like this oppression Olympics and feeling, oh, like other people had it way, worse, than me. But it's like I grew up in a household with, a father who was an alcoholic, who did his best, but was an alcoholic. There were ways in which I learned that you keep your head low and you produce. And that created a level of, inauthenticity, in me in terms of how I learned to show up in the world. I learned that, I, for many, reasons that, are partially baked in how I grew up. But then many, that I just continued to cultivate in all these different ways based on life's experiences. I learned that for me, the way that I felt safe, in the world was by what I was doing, and that was creating so much poison, in my body, that I was wanted as long as you could be proud of me, as long as I was doing something to, further, our objective to, meet these, work goals, that's how I was valuable, instead of a hard stop. I am like, period. That makes me, valuable. And so like all these places that were out of alignment, that I created so much confusion in my body around what I need to do to matter, to have worth, and to have to like sit and sift through like just all these places where I was lying to myself, and some of them sound good, it's just like, well, what's wrong with that? Like you're, helping people and all this other stuff. And it's just like, yeah, but when we create, like when we conflate that our worth is somehow connected to our ability to help other people, it's always going to be a problem. It's always going to be, an issue with our souls. And so there were so many places where I was clear I needed to heal from, my daddy issues and seeing him beat my mom and, hit us and all that other stuff. I wasn't quite clear of all the places where, I didn't all the places where I didn't honor myself, all the places, where my own mind had become, I'd become like this prisoner, inside of my own mind, all the places where I was like self-injuring, but thinking that I don't know that I'm surviving, that I'm, doing what I'm supposed to, I'm being a good adult or being a good Christian or all these other lies about who I'm supposed to, be. And so like one of the most powerful teachings for me to lean into, which I mentioned earlier, is there's absolutely nothing wrong with me. Like the way that I show up in the world is exactly, right. And my healing sits in feeling all the feelings and responding in value aligned ways. And that all of us, get to do that. It's like if I'm pissed off, I probably have good reason for being pissed off. But how do I make sure me being pissed off doesn't, end up disrespecting you, doesn't, create all these, rifts and relationships, that are important to me. And maybe even ones, that, aren't necessarily the most value aligned in terms of trying to hold on to them. But that's been huge for me, there and coming back. It's like, I just learned all these, messages around what it means to be a good person. And that did not include yelling and screaming and, expressing anger. If anything, like part of this process has taught me to feel everything, and then keep it pushing, like be clear about how I'm actually going to respond.
Yeah, feeling everything. And especially in the Black community, we are to be seen and not heard. And for somebody like me and you who grew up in church, a lot of the ways that the churches that we grew up in operate on survival mentality, right? And a lot of the practices are from the slave masters that have continuously been passed on. And I love how you articulate what's happening in the mind, because I believe that when you start off with all of that trauma, and then you live in a world that was not a environment in America that's not designed, was never designed with us in mind. So there's all these messages that are going on, right? And this is why sitting with yourself is powerful, because you learn to decipher them. now at where you are now, mentally, emotionally, you can see the message is clear. You don't feel like you have to like not say anything or not feel, or especially as a Black woman, not to be like categorized or shamed for how you feel. And then also just your value being connected to what you're doing is so many times, um, Black people don't know how to rest. and
Oof.
it feels like a luxury, but we're supposed to rest. Like we're not supposed to live in a state of stress. And I do understand it's so challenging today to not do that, and to work on creating joy, and whatever that looks like, is important to do. I feel like the rest and creating joy is part of the resistance, because what's happening
Absolutely.
is not going to change tomorrow. Um,
Absolutely.
and so like I can't allow my mental health to be contingent upon like America's status of how they treat Black people in America. Um, and go ahead.
Yeah, one thing to that point, I think that's one of the things that I've found so amazing about working with iboga is that you can know all of these things and have
Mhm,
the hardest time implementing them. And so
mhm,
for me, I got really, really clear that I was managing these things. I have some really
mm,
good practices from my therapist that I use all the time.
mhm.
And for anyone who's ever struggled with panic attacks or anxiety, it's not just mental, right? It's like this speeding up of the heart, the tightness in the chest, the shake sometimes of the body, like all those things are very real. And my experience with working with, this plant medicine is after the third ceremony, I wasn't having to fight, my body. Like I wasn't having any of those embodied experiences. And so just taking, this inventory of whoa, so if I'm not having to fight there, then what does that even free me up to be able to do? Like it's a level of grace in many ways to like be able to actually focus on what are the actual things that I now need to work on now that I'm not, having to fight this other, war that many people, end up in looking for support around, will result to traditional Western, ways of, quelching that, e.g. our pharmaceutical, industry that, gives people some relief, and some support in that direction. And so one of the things that I just, I'm a huge proponent on is, yes, like we deserve access to things that are culturally, appropriate, but they damn sure better also be effective, and meaningful. And so recognizing that if those things resonate for you, like if part of that is your experience, with emotional insobriety and high functioning stress, which was very much, my story, it's like sometimes it could just be crippling. Like that for me has been everything with actually having a real chance to be able to put
Wow.
some of these other practices in place that all of us are, emotionally intelligent enough to be able to do, but have very real struggles with, all these chemical reactions that are, spewing off in our bodies that cause us to feel incredibly out of control.
That's a good point. And a lot of those reactions that we're having started at a young age that we learn to manage, and it gets to the point sometimes where it can feel unmanageable,
Yeah.
because the body gives us signs that we're not okay, but a lot of times those signs were ignored, and then we learn to ignore them, and work around them, right? I always tell people when I grew up I used to have a lot of back pain, and now if I'm overwhelmed or stressed, I feel it in my back. I can feel it, like the heaviness, the energy. And but
I
when I was
feel it in
younger,
my neck.
yeah, nobody said like, "Oh, what's going on in the home?" or blah blah blah. They just gave me medicine.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
like, the country like treats symptoms, want
Yeah.
you to stay insecure, want you to need them. And so it's important for us, we can recognize the systems and not fall victim to it,
Yeah.
with the right education and the right tools. And so, like, I love everything that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Tell people about Root to Roots Wellness. Like, how did you develop that? I love the name.
Uh, I developed Root to Roots Wellness out of, yeah, my own story.
Yeah.
Just having a deep belief that if I'm struggling with these things, that there are other folks out there with a similar
Yeah.
story. So, our mission is to create more access to mental health services, especially ones that are rooted in ancestral knowledge and wisdom. So, just this reclamation of what our people know, what they knew then, what we still know now, even the things that may not be like on our frontal awareness, but sit
Mhm.
deep, in our bodies and our DNA, why we like certain things, that gravitation, towards particular foods and teas and all the things, that there's much healing to be had with reclaiming those things. But I also, place an emphasis on play. So we were mentioning earlier, the importance of Black joy. I find that, there's so much healing that just comes from, really taking up space and doing things that matter to you, that you love to do, that you care about. I was telling, I think my husband that I don't think for at least maybe 15 years, I had an intentional like form of play on my calendar since playing organized sports. Like when you think about your calendar, like what your calendar looks like, when you look at your schedule, like when do you, like I schedule play dates for my son, but like what gets on your schedule that's like play for
That's
you? The
true.
last time that, well, I'm more intentional about it now, but like taking inventory, I was like, oh my goodness, I think the last time I had like this week to week scheduling of play was when I played organized sports. And then there got to a point where that became more like a job, right? By the time I was playing, sports in high school, I was like, y'all people crazy. Like, we not even that good. Y'all acting like we some D1 team. It's like this ain't even fun, no more. But I encourage, everybody out there listening, like, look at your schedule. And if you don't have something on there week to week that you are actually doing that is play, that is purely play, you do it because you like it. It don't even mean, that you're good at it. I like, to paint. I'm not that great at it. But it's like, and even that's a thing. I feel like sometimes we won't play or do things if we don't think we're good at it, like there's a level to which a
Yeah.
lot of us get shut down and disconnected, in that way, that needs to be addressed,
Yeah.
that we deserve, to get addressed. And so with Root to Roots Wellness, like just giving people opportunities to try and explore different things. It's like there's not one route to, wellness. It looks
Not.
different, for all of us. And so just recognizing that, this work that I do is part of a larger ecosystem. I'm so grateful to be sitting here with you. I'm like, we need more, woke therapists who are supporting people, in all the ways, and recognizing that, talk therapy and EMDR, all these different things, have value.
Mhm.
And like there are other ways that people can
Yeah.
supporting themselves, and that they should deserve and have birthright, to have access to. So
I
that's
love
the work
that.
going on.
This is so
Yeah.
dope. It's so exciting. Through this podcast, even when I started, I didn't really know I knew there was other people empowering people, but I didn't know to what capacity. And after, speaking to so many people over the years, my mind is just so open. And I'm so grateful for you and your willingness to share your story, and you use your story to like really delve more into your purpose and your passion, which is great. Now, if people are listening and they wanted to work with you, or tell people a little bit about the things that you offer for people, because, and then if it's only in Mass or if it's across the country.
Absolutely. So COVID has changed the world. So I do a lot of things, via Zoom now, but I love in person. So I'm a Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New England folks out there. I love y'all. Hey, hey. So the types of things that I offer are herbal consultations. So always supporting people in that way. So from physical healing to mental health. But I also have a really, special place in my heart and is prioritized in my work with leading people on retreats. So I do plant medicine retreats where folks can actually come and sit with iboga. One of the really beautiful things about iboga, it's referred to as the godfather of all medicine. You can work with it in 3 different ways. So people seek physical healing with it, spiritual healing. And when I say spiritual, meaning work in relationship to places where there's confusion or misalignment that's causing us not to hear clearly from our soul. So those are often, like grouped together with folks who are, struggling with emotional insobriety and high functioning stress. And then lastly, Buiti has this beautiful teaching that says, look, heal once and be done. My teacher was like, Americans love to be on this healing journey. Like, we love to be healing our whole lives. He's like, as long as you on a journey, you ain't gonna never actually get there. He's like, are you gonna get there, at the end of your life? It's like, heal now and be done. Because the thing that our ancestors understood was that there are other ways to work with plant medicine. So there's this third aspect of spiritual discovery where you can go and have live conversations with your ancestors, look for guidance and seek guidance in that way. And so especially, I see, I feel like especially millennials, there's like more talk in the West, like Ifa culture and Yoruba and like Santeria and like all these things where, I see people making ancestor altars and things like that, that really excite me. It's like, this was one of the practices that got stripped, like hand off, the minute we got here, got to these, shores, on these boats, people are trying to keep us from talking to our ancestors, trying to keep us from this, like, legacy and knowledge of what we do and how we, to heal. And so for folks who are interested in working with, iboga for any of those, reasons, I offer those types of retreats, then also offering these play retreats. And so recognizing that there's room to just have fun. I've been to over 40 countries. I believe in people just having fun, like getting out there and like seeing the world and like actually knowing that there's benefit in there. One of my favorite things to share is the best part of taking a trip isn't just the trip. It's the planning of the trip. There are like all these studies that talk about you release more endorphins in the planning process than you do in the actual trip itself. And so it's like, if it's with me or someone else, or you're doing it on your own, get out there and figure out what play looks like for you, and like schedule these intentional times on your calendar where you're doing it, because they mean so much to our mental health, knowing that we have prioritized ourselves and that those things are happening. You'll release endorphins just in anticipation of it.
So she's not talking about the Hennessy Friday night parties. Nothing wrong with that, guys, but I'm saying, something where you can have a clear mind. Because some people might be like, yeah, I go every Friday night, because that was me. I used to party every weekend to deal with my depression.
I know that's right.
I was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that was getting me through, and then back to school and work.
I know that's right. Me too.
But now, like the woods, it's crazy because when I try to get people to hike with me and stuff, my people, they be like, Black people don't hike, they'll be in the woods. And so it's interesting because like now I'm just so into natural resources and water and stuff. And I never ever thought that was like, I never thought I would think this way. But I need people to know, like, there's natural resources that we really got to start tapping into, because at baseline there's like so much peace that I experience now that I never thought was available to me. So
absolutely. And I just think, paying attention to, everyone says the same thing. I don't know grounded folks out there who aren't spending some type of time in nature. What's really, when I was in Gabon, one of the things that my teacher said was that, babies, in the West, we're quick to swaddle the baby, put clothes on the baby. He's like, we take the naked babies and let them do their first grounding work, like, and play in the dirt. Babies, rolling around in the dirt and like peeing and rolling around and they're peeing in the dirt. And, the OCD in me is like, no, get the baby, somebody get the baby. But with complete sincerity and seriousness, he's like, because we understand how to ground. He was like, and babies know how to
Yeah.
ground. He's like, pay attention to what your kids are doing. Like they'll show you like how to show up in this world, like how to live in this world. And so just recognizing that, for myself, I didn't grow up camping and all that stuff either. I
Yeah.
feel blessed to where my husband did. And so, he gets us out, in nature in that way. But I love it. Like I
I love it
absolutely,
too.
love it now. And coming to find out, oh, I love, having a garden and, being in the soil. And I think, even my folks out there who are like, not me, that's not, my story. I encourage you,
To
to
try.
try
Yeah.
it, and then there are different ways, and so you may find, oh, you need to be, by water. Maybe the beach is your thing, or, taking
Yes.
these breaks in the woods in your thing. I love, like long walks in the morning. Like you'll find, your different niches. But it's about reconnecting to the earth because that's one of the primary ways we ground.
Yeah, that's good. And I just, it's so like all the things you're talking about is so great. I know for like any of the hardcore Christians, like a lot of this stuff is stuff that may feel so foreign to you. But um it's important to like, especially if you're finding yourself struggling. If what you're doing is working, that's fine. But if you're struggling, like open up your mind, because what you are talking about has been around forever. And but nobody profits if we're cultivating this stuff in our gardens and sustaining, right? So just keep that in mind.
And I just want to say this. So I've gotten really clear. My job isn't to convince people of anything. My job
Mhm.
is to be a bridge for the folks who,
Mhm.
want access to the things that I'm offering. Um, but honestly, it was reading the Bible for me in a lot of ways that like solidified, these things for me. I can remember talking to one of my Buddhist friends about Yeshua walking on water. His mama named him Yeshua. That's why I'm calling him Yeshua. So Jesus to some, Yeshua to his mom, Yeshua walking on water. And my Buddhist friend being like, yeah, like if you lower your vibration, you can do the same thing. Or I'm learning about astral projection, and then revisiting these scriptures of, John talking about, and then I was caught up to the third heaven. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, it sounds like astral projection to me. Or, looking at Yeshua spitting in dirt and making a salve and putting it on somebody's eyes, the scales falling off and now they're healed. Or looking at the incense being burnt in the temple and
Yeah.
all the sacred smoke, that we use
Yeah.
in these practices, and so on and so on
That's
and so on.
yeah.
There's so much quote unquote witchy stuff in the Bible. It's like so much stuff that we claim we believe in, but when we see it in practice, we get scared of it and we get
Yeah.
confused, about it. And my question to people is why? Who benefits, from us not working with these things in these ways? Who benefits, from us being scared, of these healing modalities that we see, in these scriptures and in these sacred texts, but in, others, too. And it's just like, it's something for us to just start asking questions about and,
I
being
love
aware
that.
about. Because there's so much anti-blackness in the world. Oh goodness, we all got to heal from our anti-blackness.
Yes, and we can still create joy even though it's still that way. Don't forget, guys.
Yes, now. Yeah,
Thank you
absolutely.
so much. Tell people how they can reach you. And then for people listening too, you could find it in the show notes. But while you're listening, you could let people know how to reach you.
Absolutely. So you can reach out to me on social media. My handle on Facebook and Instagram is at Root to Roots Wellness. So that's ROUTE, like the road, the number 2, and then roots like grounded. So ROOTS, Root to Roots Wellness. Or you can check me out on my website, which is www.roottoroots.us. Yeah.
Thank you. This was good. I appreciate you for like making time to come on and share about everything that you're doing. It's really inspiring.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the work you're doing too, sis. Thank you for everything. That's amazing.